Black CEO humiliated at car dealership and terminates $65 million contract. Morgan Sterling never imagined that Saturday morning would completely change the course of her career and her life. The 42-year-old executive had decided to give herself a gift after years of hard work, building her technology consulting firm. It was at the most luxurious dealership in New York City that she faced the most humiliating situation in her entire professional journey. Wearing her best white suit and carrying her Italian leather briefcase, Morgan entered the showroom expecting to be treated with the same courtesy any client deserved. The salesman, Brad Jenkins, barely looked up when she approached the model she had researched for weeks. It was a black executive sedan, exactly what she needed for her business meetings. Price was not an issue after all. Her company had closed multi-million-dollar contracts in recent months. "Excuse me, I'd like to see this model," said Morgan in her firm, polite voice. Brad continued organizing papers on his desk as if she were invisible. Other salespeople were attending to clients who had arrived after her, all white, all treated with broad smiles and full attention. "Sir, I'm talking to you," insisted Morgan, keeping her respectful tone. "Oh, you!" Brad finally looked her up and down. "This here is an expensive car, you know. Maybe you want to check out the used ones across the street." The words hit Morgan like a punch to the stomach. In her 42 years of life, she had faced many obstacles, built a company from scratch, formed a team of over 200 employees. But she had never been treated with such contempt in a commercial setting. "I have the money to buy this car," she replied, trying to stay calm. "Of course you do," Brad laughed, and his laughter echoed through the showroom. "Everyone who comes in here says the same thing." Other clients began to look in their direction. A grey-haired lady averted her gaze, embarrassed. A young couple whispered to each other, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Morgan opened her briefcase and took out her company card. Sterling Strategic Tech was engraved in gold letters, along with her name and the title of CEO. She extended the card to Brad. "I am the CEO of Sterling Strategic Tech. I would like to buy this car in cash." Brad took the card and examined it as if it were a counterfeit bill. Then he started laughing even louder. "You, CEO?" he called to other salespeople. "Guys, come see this. The lady here says she's a CEO." The public humiliation was like a knife to Morgan's heart. She had worked 16-hour days for years to get where she was. She had given up relationships, family moments, had faced the skepticism of investors who doubted her ability because she was a woman and black. "Listen here, princess." Brad returned the card with disdain. "Stop putting on a show. People like you don't have money to buy cars at this level. Go look for something more suited to your standards somewhere else." The words "people like you" reverberated in Morgan's mind. She knew well the meaning behind that phrase. She had heard variations of it throughout her life, but never so explicitly and cruelly. A young saleswoman named Ashley watched the scene from across the showroom. She recognized Morgan immediately. She had seen her photo in Business Weekly the previous week, in a feature about the most powerful women in the technology sector. Ashley tried to discreetly approach her supervisor. "Mr. Arthur, that lady over there," Ashley began. "Don't interrupt, Ashley. Brad knows how to handle this." Arthur didn't even look in Morgan's direction. Morgan took a deep breath, put the card back in her briefcase, and walked toward the exit. Every step was a struggle against the tears of anger that wanted to surface. At the door, she turned to Brad. "You'll regret this," she said, with a trembling yet firm voice. Sure," Brad laughed again. "I'll be waiting." The dealership parking lot had never seemed so long. Morgan got into her current car, a simpler model she had bought 3 years earlier when her company was still growing. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel. She drove to her home in Greenwich, a luxury gated community where she had lived alone since separating from her husband 2 years prior. The relationship hadn't withstood her growing success and the long work hours. In the silence of her living room, Morgan finally let the tears fall. They weren't tears of sadness, but of pure anger. Anger for having been judged by the color of her skin. Anger for having been underestimated. Anger for having been humiliated in public. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. The phone rang. It was Dorothy, her personal assistant of 5 years, a 58-year-old woman who had become more than an employee. She was a confidant and friend. "Morgan, how did the car purchase go?" Dorothy asked excitedly. "I didn't buy anything," Morgan tried to control her voice. "What happened? Wasn't the model what you wanted?" Morgan told Dorothy the whole situation, who listened with growing, silent indignation. "That's outrageous. You should sue that dealership." Dorothy was furious. "It's no use, Dorothy. It's always their word against ours." "No, it's not. You are Morgan Sterling, CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. You can't let this slide." After hanging up, Morgan kept thinking about Dorothy's words. Maybe she really shouldn't let it slide, but what could she do? What? Suing for discrimination was a long and draining process, and she wasn't sure she wanted to expose her personal life in that way. On Sunday morning, Morgan woke up determined to forget the incident and move on. There was an important meeting on Monday with a potential client, and she needed to focus on work. But Dorothy had other plans. She arrived early at the office on Monday and was waiting for Morgan with a folder full of documents. "Sit here," said Dorothy, with a serious tone that Morgan rarely heard. "What is this?" Morgan looked at the folder curiously. "These are all the active contracts our company has at the moment." Dorothy opened the first page. "You're going to want to see this." Morgan began to leaf through the documents. Contracts with banks, telecommunications companies, major retailers. Her company had grown a lot in recent years, and she didn't personally keep track of every detail of each contract. "Dorothy, why are you showing me this?" Morgan was impatient. "Page 67, Dorothy pointed. Morgan turned to the indicated page and her heart stopped. There was a $65 million contract with the Harrison Corporate Group, signed 6 months earlier. The contract involved modernizing all the digital systems of the group's companies. "Dorothy, this group, what do they own again?" "Various things, but look at the next page." Morgan turned the page and saw the complete list of the group's companies. Restaurants, gas stations, 2 gyms, and 3 luxury car dealerships. One of them was exactly where she had been humiliated. "How is this possible?" Morgan stood up, incredulous. "Julian signed this contract when you were traveling for that conference in Aspen." Dorothy referred to the company's vice president. "He said it was urgent, and that you had given him autonomy to close deals of that value." Morgan vaguely remembered giving that authorization, but never imagined it would be used for such a large contract without her final approval. "Get Julian in here now," ordered Morgan. Julian Montgomery arrived 20 minutes later, with his ever-confident manner and broad smile. At 38, he was one of the best salespeople Morgan had ever known, capable of closing deals others considered impossible. "Good morning, boss," Julian entered excitedly. "Dorothy said it was urgent." "Julian, explain this contract with the Harrison Group to me." Morgan showed him the documents. "Oh, that one. It was a beautiful deal. $65 million to modernize all their systems. It'll give us an excellent profit margin." "Did you research the group's companies before signing?" "Of course. It's a solid group, been in the market for over 20 years. "Why do you ask?" Morgan told Julian what had happened at the dealership. The vice president listened with an expression of growing discomfort. "Look, Morgan, that's really terrible. But we can't mix personal issues with business." Julian tried to use his most diplomatic tone. "This contract represents almost 20% of our annual revenue." "Personal issues?" Morgan's voice rose a few tones. "You think racial discrimination is a personal issue?" "No, that's not it. Of course not. But look, how about we talk to them? I'm sure the owner of the group will be horrified when he finds out. They'll fire the salesman, apologize formally, and we continue with the contract." "And you think that fixes it?" Morgan was getting increasingly irritated. "Honestly, I think so. We can't break a contract like this because of one stupid employee." Julian's response was the last straw. Morgan realized in that moment that her own vice president didn't understand the gravity of the situation. For him, it was just an incident that could be resolved with some formal apologies. "I want a meeting with the CEO of the Harrison Group today," said Morgan. "Morgan, I don't think it's a good idea for you to go there while you're still upset." I'm not upset, Julian. I'm determined. Schedule that meeting. Julian left the room, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Dorothy stayed with Morgan. Are you really going to cancel the contract? Asked Dorothy. I don't know yet, but I'm going there to see what kind of people we're doing business with. The meeting was scheduled for 3 p.m. at the Harrison Group headquarters, a mirrored building in the Wall Street area. Morgan dressed in her most formal suit, a navy blue set she wore only on special occasions. The group's CEO was Lawrence Harrison, a 60-year-old man who had inherited the business from his father. He received her in his office with a panoramic view of the city, but his greeting was cold and formal. Miss Sterling, I heard there was a misunderstanding at one of our dealerships, said Lawrence without even offering water or coffee. Misunderstanding? Morgan kept her voice controlled. I'd say it was explicit racial discrimination. Look, let's not exaggerate with words. Sometimes our salespeople get a little overly enthusiastic with security procedures. Security procedures? The salesman told me to look for used cars because people like me don't have money to buy new cars. Lawrence sighed as if dealing with a child throwing a tantrum. I understand your annoyance. How about this? I fire the salesman today. You get a 15% discount on any car at the store, and we consider the matter closed. The coldness and dismissiveness in Lawrence's voice left Morgan in shock. He really thought a 15% discount on a car would make up for the public humiliation she had suffered. Are you serious? Morgan leaned forward. Perfectly serious. It's a good offer. And what do you intend to do to ensure this doesn't happen to other clients? Look, Mrs. Sterling, I'll be frank with you. You're being a bit too sensitive. These things happen. It's part of life. The important thing is to move forward. In that moment, Morgan understood the problem wasn't just one rude salesperson. The discrimination came from the top. It was in the company's very culture. Lawrence Harrison made it clear he saw nothing serious in what had happened. I'm going to have to reconsider our business partnership, said Morgan, standing up. What do you mean? Lawrence seemed genuinely confused. The $65 million contract we have with you. Lawrence's expression changed completely. He knew exactly which contract she was talking about. Now, let's not mix things up, okay? He tried to smile. One thing has nothing to do with the other. For me it does, Mr. Harrison. I cannot do business with companies that don't respect people's dignity. Mrs. Sterling, you're being emotional. Business is business. That contract is already signed. There are legal obligations on both sides. I'll consult my legal department about that. Morgan left the room, leaving Lawrence Harrison visibly worried. In the elevator, she called her lawyer, Dr. Evelyn Reed, a 55-year-old black woman who had been her professor in college and later became her legal consultant. Evelyn, I need you to analyze a contract urgently. I want to know if we have legal grounds for cancellation due to breach of ethical principles. What kind of breach of ethical principles? Evelyn was always precise in her questions. Systemic racial discrimination. I understand. Send the contract. I'll analyze it today. Back at the office, Morgan found Julian waiting for her, visibly nervous. So, how did it go? Worse than I imagined. The problem isn't just one salesperson, it's cultural. Morgan, for God's sake, think this through. We can't break a $65 million contract because of... Because of what, Julian? Finish the sentence. Julian realized he was treading on dangerous ground. That's not what I meant. It's just that sometimes we have to be pragmatic. Pragmatic? Morgan couldn't believe what she was hearing. You think it's pragmatic to do business with companies that humiliate clients because of their skin color? It's not quite like that. It's exactly like that, Julian. And if you can't understand that, maybe it's time to rethink your role in this company. The threat hung in the air. Julian left the room without another word, clearly shaken. Dorothy entered soon after with a cup of coffee. How are you feeling? She asked with maternal care. Confused, Dorothy. Very confused. I built this company with so much effort, and now I find out I'm doing business with people who look down on me. You know you have my full support, no matter what you decide. That night, at home, Morgan couldn't stop thinking about the dilemma she faced. On one hand, cancelling the contract would mean a huge financial loss for her company. On the other, Keeping the contract would mean swallowing her dignity and accepting that discrimination was just business. She called her mother, Mrs. Gladys, a 72-year-old woman who had raised 3 children alone working as a housekeeper. "Mum, can I talk to you?" "Of course, my daughter. What happened?" Morgan told the whole story to her mother, who listened in silence. "And now, Mom, what would you do in my place?" "Daughter, I spent my whole life swallowing humiliation because I had no choice. You do. That's the difference between us." "But the money, Mom." "Mo, you already have money." "Already have. What you can't buy back is your dignity after you sell it." Her mother's words echoed in Morgan's mind all night. The next morning, Evelyn called early. "Morgan, I analyzed the contract. There's a termination clause for breach of corporate ethical values. It's a bit vague, but given the situation you described, we do have legal grounds. And the financial consequences? They'll try to charge a termination penalty, but we can contest it by arguing that they broke the contract first through discriminatory practices. How long would a lawsuit like that take? 2 to 3 years. But honestly, I don't think they'll want to go to court. A racial discrimination case becomes news, and that's terrible for any company's image." Morgan thanked her and hung up. Now she had the information she needed to make a decision. Arriving at the office, she found a surprise. Ashley, the young salesperson from the dealership, was in the reception area waiting to speak with her. "How did you find out where I work?" asked Morgan. "I looked it up online after what happened on Saturday." Ashley was visibly nervous. "I wanted to apologize for my colleagues' behavior." "You don't need to apologize for them." "Yes, I do. I recognized you the moment you walked into the store. I saw your photo in Business Weekly last week. I tried to warn my supervisor, but he wouldn't listen." "And why are you here?" "Because I was fired yesterday. They said it was for insubordination, but it was really because I tried to defend you." Morgan was shocked. The situation was worse than she had imagined. "Sit down, Ashley. Tell me everything." Ashley revealed that the discriminatory behavior was not an isolated incident. Brad, the salesperson who had humiliated Morgan, already had a history of mistreating black customers. Several complaints had been made, but management always swept the situations under the rug. "There's more," said Ashley. "The store manager got a call from the corporate office yesterday. Someone mentioned that you have a contract with the group. After that, he was desperate trying to find your phone number to apologize. They know who I am. They know now. Manager Arthur was almost having a heart attack when I left there." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The information Ashley brought completely changed Morgan's perspective on the situation. It wasn't just an isolated case of prejudice, but a pattern of behavior that was systematically covered up by management. "Ashley, would you agree to be a witness in a lawsuit?" asked Morgan. "Of course, I have nothing left to lose anyway." "Actually, you do. How about a new job?" Ashley's eyes lit up. "Really? We're expanding our customer relations team. Someone who recognizes discrimination and tries to fight it even at personal risk is exactly the type of person we want in our company." Ashley began to cry with emotion. "Thank you so much, Miss Sterling. You can't imagine what this means to me." After Ashley left, Morgan called a meeting with the entire company board. Besides Julian, those present were Sarah Mitchell, Chief Financial Officer, Christopher Lee, Chief Technology Officer, and Kimberly Thompson, Director of Human Resources. "Everyone, I need to tell you about a situation that happened to me and that directly affects our company," Morgan began. She recounted the entire dealership incident and the discovery of the contract with the Harrison corporate group. The room fell into absolute silence. Marina was the first to speak. "Morgan, from a financial standpoint, cancelling this contract would be a disaster. It represents almost 20% of our annual revenue." "I understand the financial concern, Marina, but we're talking about basic principles of human dignity." Juan Carlos took a position. "I think we should try to resolve this diplomatically. Talk to them, demand changes in practices, but keep the contract." "And if they refuse to make real changes?" questioned Morgan. "Then we cancel," said Kimberly. "We cannot be complicit with discrimination." Julian remained silent, but his expression made it clear he disagreed with Kimberly's position. "I'll give them an ultimatum," decided Morgan. "Either they implement deep structural changes, including mandatory training for the entire team on diversity and inclusion, termination of employees involved in discriminatory practices, and the creation of an independent ombudsman for complaints, or we cancel the contract." "And if they accept?" asked Sarah. "Even so, I'll reassess whether I want to continue doing business with them. Some things can't be fixed just with training." The meeting ended with the decision to give the Harrison Group 48 hours to respond to the ultimatum. Morgan called Antonio Fernandez personally and explained the demands. On the other end of the line, there was a long silence. "Mrs. Sterling, you are exaggerating. We are not going to change our entire corporate structure because of a misunderstanding. Then consider our contract cancelled." "You can't do that. We have a signed contract." "Yes, I can, Mr. Harrison, for breach of ethical values. My lawyer confirmed we have legal grounds." "This will turn into a legal war." "If necessary, it will." Morgan hung up the phone, feeling lighter than she had felt in days. She had made the decision. In the following hours, her phone didn't stop ringing. Lawrence Harrison called 3 times, alternating between legal threats and attempts at negotiation. Julian came to her office twice, trying to convince her to reconsider. "Morgan, please, think this over. We're going to lose the company's biggest client. Julian, if you can't understand that there are things more important than money, perhaps you're not the right person for this position. Are you firing me? I'm giving you the chance to rethink your values. If they don't change, yes, I will have to fire you." Julian left the room, visibly shaken. He had worked at the company for 5 years and had never questioned Morgan's decisions before. At the end of the day, Dorothy entered the room with an envelope. "This arrived for you by courier." It was a letter from the legal department of the Harrison Group, threatening to sue Morgan for breach of contract and financial damages. "Are they bluffing?" asked Dorothy. "We'll find out. Call Evelyn, I need to speak with her." Evelyn arrived at the office an hour later with a folder full of documents. "Morgan, I've prepared everything we need to contest any legal action from them, but I have a suggestion." "What?" "How about we make this public? A case of racial discrimination resulting in the cancellation of $1 million contract will get the attention of the specialized media. I don't want to turn this into a circus." "It wouldn't be a circus. It would be social awareness. Other companies need to know discrimination has real consequences." Morgan thought about the suggestion. Her whole life she had avoided drawing attention to racial issues, preferring to prove her worth through work. But perhaps it was time for a different approach. "If I decide to make this public, how would we do it?" "I have contacts in the specialized press. We can start discreetly, with business magazines. The important thing is to control the narrative, focus on the business and ethical aspect of the decision." "Let me think about it." The next morning, Morgan woke up to several messages on her phone. One of them was from Ashley, who had started working at the company the day before. "Good morning, Mrs. Sterling. I wanted to thank you once again for the opportunity. I promised to give my best." The message brought a smile to Morgan's face. At least one good thing had come out of this whole situation. At the office, she found an unusual commotion. Several employees were whispering in small groups, and the atmosphere seemed tense. "Dorothy, what's going on?" "Apparently the news about the contract cancellation is leaked. People are worried about their jobs." "Gather everyone in the auditorium. I'll explain the situation." In the company auditorium, Morgan found over 200 employees waiting for an explanation. It was the first time in years she had seen such tension in the workplace. "Everyone, I know you're concerned about the news that's circulating. I want to be transparent with all of you." For the first time, publicly, she told the whole story of what had happened at the dealership and her decision to cancel the contract. "I know this represents a significant financial loss for our company, but as CEO, I cannot do business with organizations that practice discrimination." An employee raised a hand. "Does this mean there will be layoffs?" "I will do everything in my power to prevent that. We are seeking new clients to offset this loss." "And if we can't?" asked another employee. "If it comes to that, I would rather cut my own salary before letting any of you go. You built this company with me, and I won't abandon you." The auditorium fell silent for a few seconds, then erupted in applause. Morgan realized she had made the right decision. Her employees understood and supported her position. After the meeting, Christopher Lee sought out Morgan in her office. "I want to tell you I fully support your decision. Discrimination has no place in the business world. Thank you, Christopher. I need the board's support right now." "You have my full support. And I have a suggestion." "What is it?" "How about we create a formal diversity and inclusion policy for our company? We can set an example for other firms in the sector." "Excellent idea. Talk to Kimberly about this." Sarah Mitchell also appeared in Morgan's office, but with a more concerned expression. "Morgan, I've redone all the financial projections. Without this contract, we'll have to be very careful with spending in the coming months." "I understand. What measures do you suggest?" "Cutting non-essential expenses, postponing some expansion projects, and a total focus on securing new clients." "Do whatever is necessary, Sarah, but no layoffs." "Understood." Late in the afternoon, Morgan received an unexpected call. It was from Marcus Washington, president of the National Alliance of Minority Executives. "Ms. Sterling, I heard what happened. I would like to speak with you in person." "Of course. When would be convenient?" "How about tomorrow morning?" "I can come to your office." Carlos arrived at the appointed time, a 50-year-old man, elegant and with a commanding presence. He did not come alone. He brought 2 lawyers specializing in racial discrimination cases. "Ms. Sterling, what you did was courageous and necessary. We want to offer our full support." "What kind of support?" "Legal, media, and business. We have a network of over 500 associated companies. If you allow it, we can help find new clients to compensate for the loss of the contract." "That would be incredible, but there's a condition." "What is it?" "That you allow us to publicize your case. This could inspire other executives to take similar actions." Morgan hesitated. Publicizing the case would mean exposing her personal and professional life in a way she had never done before. "I need to think about this." "Of course. But think quickly. The story is already spreading in business circles. It's better that you control the narrative before others do it for you." After Carlos left, Morgan was alone in her office, reflecting on his words. Was the case really spreading? How? She called Evelyn. "Evelyn, have you heard anything leaking about our case?" "Actually, yes. I got 3 calls today from journalists asking about the contract cancellation. I didn't confirm or deny anything, but they're on the trail of the story." "How did they find out?" "I suspect it leaked from the Harrison Group themselves. They're probably trying to get ahead of it, to create a version of the story favorable to them." "What do we do?" "Exactly what the president of the alliance suggested. We control the narrative before others do it for us." That night, Morgan barely slept. Her life was about to change irreversibly. If she decided to make the case public, there would be no going back. The next morning, she arrived early at the office and found Dorothy already working. "Dorothy, I need to make an important decision. Can I count on your opinion?" "Always, Morgan." She explained the alliance's proposal and the discovery that the story was already leaking. "What would you do in my place?" "My dear," Dorothy rarely called her that, only in very intimate moments. "You built a company based on competence and honesty. Now it's time to show it's also built on moral values. Tell the story." "And if this hurts the company? And if not telling it hurts other people going through the same thing you went through? Sometimes we have responsibilities that go beyond our own interests." Dorothy's wisdom touched Morgan deeply. She called Marcus Washington. "I agree to go public with the case, but I want total control over how the story will be told." "Perfect. We have a journalist specialized in corporate diversity issues. She can interview you today." The interview took place in Morgan's office with journalist Vanessa Wright, a 40-year-old black woman who worked for the country's leading business magazine. "Ms. Sterling, why did you decide to cancel such an important contract?" "Because I cannot separate my personal values from my company's values. If I accept being humiliated and do nothing, I'm telling my employees, my clients, and society that discrimination is acceptable as long as it's profitable." "Weren't you afraid of the financial impact?" "Of course I was. But I was more afraid of looking in the mirror and not liking the person I saw. What message would you like to leave for other executives? That social responsibility isn't just marketing. It's about making difficult decisions even when they're costly. If we have privilege and power, we have an obligation to use it to build a better society. The article was published 3 days later and had an immediate impact. Morgan's phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from other executives, some supporting her decision, others criticizing it. But the biggest surprise came when Sarah entered her office with a spreadsheet. "Morgan, you need to see this." "What is it?" "In the last 48 hours, we've received 16 proposals for new contracts, companies that want to work with us specifically because of your ethical stance." "Really?" "Really. 3 of them are contracts larger than the one we cancelled." Morgan could hardly believe it. Her decision, which seemed so financially risky, was turning into an opportunity. "There's more," said Sarah. 2 international companies got in touch. They want to hire us for consultancies on diversity and inclusion. "How so?" "Apparently our story reached international markets. They want to learn how to implement ethical values without harming business." That afternoon, Julian sought out Morgan. His expression was different, less arrogant, more humble. "Morgan, I want to apologize to you." "For what?" "For not understanding the gravity of the situation, for thinking only about the financial aspect. You were right from the start." "What made you change your mind?" "I spoke with my wife last night. She made me understand how I would sound if it were my teenage daughter going through this. I felt ashamed." "And now?" "Now I want to learn. I want to help our company become an example of inclusion and diversity in the market." Morgan smiled. It was the first time in days she felt truly hopeful about the future. 2 weeks after the article was published, Lawrence Harrison called Morgan personally. "Ms. Sterling, I would like to speak with you personally once more." "For what, Mr. Harrison?" "To propose some changes to our business practices. Perhaps we can reconsider our contract." "What kind of changes?" "We fired 3 employees involved in discriminatory practices, including the salesman you encountered. We've implemented mandatory diversity training for all staff, and we've created an independent ombudsman for complaints." Morgan was surprised. These were exactly the demands she had made initially. "And why these changes now?" "Because we lost other clients besides you, and our reputation is being questioned in the market." "I see. And what are you proposing?" "That we resume our contract. With the changes implemented, I don't think we have any more issues with ethical values." Morgan thought for a few seconds. "Mr. Harrison, I appreciate the changes you've made, but I cannot resume the contract." "Why? We did everything you asked." "You did it under pressure, not out of conviction. If you hadn't lost money, you'd still be using the old practices. That's not real change, it's just crisis management." Lawrence was silent for a few seconds. "You are being inflexible. I am being consistent. I wish you luck with the changes. I hope they are lasting and sincere." After hanging up, Morgan felt she had definitively closed that chapter of her life. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out. Now continuing. 1 month after the contract cancellation, Morgan's company was in its best shape ever. The new contracts not only compensated for the financial loss, but brought growth greater than what they had before. More importantly, the company had become a reference for diversity and inclusion in the technology sector. Morgan received weekly invitations to speak about ethical leadership at universities and business conferences. At one of these talks at Sterling State University, she found a surprise in the audience. It was Brad, the salesman who had humiliated her at the dealership. After the lecture, he approached her. "Ms. Sterling, may I speak with you for a minute?" "Of course. I want to apologize for what I did. I have no justification for my behavior." "What brought you here?" "I'm taking a professional reskilling course. When I heard you were speaking here, I decided to come. I wanted to look you in the eye and ask for forgiveness." Morgan was surprised by Brad's apparent sincerity. "And what do you plan to do now?" "Trying to start over. I couldn't get a job in sales after what happened. I'm studying to become an IT technician." That's a good field. I know I don't deserve it, but if one day there's an opportunity at your company, I really have changed." Morgan looked at him for a few seconds. "Brad, real change takes time. If you have truly changed, it will show in your future actions. If one day our paths cross again professionally, it will be based on the person you have become, not the one you were." "I understand. Thank you for hearing me out." Watching Brad walk away, Morgan reflected on how that incident had changed not only her life, but the lives of so many others. Ashley was rising quickly in the company. Julian had become an active advocate for inclusion policies. Even Brad was trying to transform himself. 6 months after the incident, Morgan received an unexpected call. It was from Victoria Harrison, daughter of Lawrence Harrison. "Mrs. Sterling, I'm Maria, daughter of Lawrence Harrison." "Hi Maria, how can I help you? I'd like to speak with you in person, if possible." "About what?" "About taking over the presidency of the family businesses." Morgan was intrigued. They scheduled a meeting for the next day. Maria was a 35-year-old woman with a degree in business administration who had worked abroad for the last 10 years. She was completely different from her father, modern, open, and visibly concerned with social issues. "Mrs. Sterling, I want to personally apologize for our company's behavior. What happened was unacceptable." "Thank you for the apology, Maria. I am taking over as president of the group because my father is retiring, and I want to do things differently." "What kind of differences?" "I want to implement real diversity and inclusion policies, not just for marketing, but out of conviction, and I would like to invite you to help us in this transformation." "As a consultant?" "Initially, yes, but I have a bigger proposal. How about we become partners?" "Partners?" "I'm proposing a joint venture. Your company would handle all the technological modernization of our operations and also help us develop diversity and inclusion practices. In return, we offer a long-term contract and a share of the profits." It was a tempting and unexpected proposal. Morgan asked for time to think. "Maria, I appreciate your proposal, but I need real guarantees that these changes are genuine." "What kind of guarantees?" "I want to see the changes implemented first. If in 6 months you demonstrate real transformation in the company culture, we can talk about partnership." "Fair. And how can we demonstrate this transformation?" "Hire Black employees in leadership positions, implement trainee programs focused on diversity, create inclusion metrics with clear goals, and most importantly, maintain all of this even when it's not convenient or profitable." Done. In 6 months, you will see a completely different company. Maria kept her word. In 6 months, the Harrison corporate group had transformed drastically. They hired a director of diversity and inclusion, a Black woman with extensive experience in the field. They implemented a trainee program that reserved 50% of the spots for Black and multiracial candidates. And more impressively, they created a community development fund that invested in education in underserved neighborhoods. When Maria approached Morgan again, the numbers spoke for themselves. In 6 months, we increased our racial diversity in leadership positions from 5 to 28%. Our internal employee satisfaction rose from 60 to 85%. And our market reputation improved drastically. And the financial results? Better than ever. We discovered that diversity really is good for business, not only morally, but financially too. Morgan decided to accept the partnership, but with clear conditions. "I accept, but I want contractual clauses that guarantee these diversity policies are maintained regardless of changes in leadership." "No problem." The partnership between the two companies became a case study in business schools about how ethical conflicts can transform into opportunities for mutual growth. 2 years after the incident at the dealership, Morgan was invited to receive an Ethical Business Leadership Award from the National Association of Administrators. In her acceptance speech, she told the whole story. 2 people walked into a dealership that Saturday morning. One was a Black woman who wanted to buy a car. The other was a CEO who had to choose between profit and dignity. "If I had chosen profit that day, I would still be rich. but I wouldn't be the person I am today. I learned that our values are only tested when they come at a high price. It's easy to be ethical when there are no consequences. True character emerges when we have to sacrifice something important to do the right thing. I also learned that doing the right thing is rarely a real sacrifice. Cancelling that contract brought me better opportunities, stronger partnerships, and a reputation worth more than any single contract. But the most important lesson is that none of us can remain neutral in the face of injustice. If we have power, we have responsibility. If we have a voice, we have an obligation to use it. If we have a choice, we cannot choose silence. The audience rose in a standing ovation for over 5 minutes. After the ceremony, Ashley, who was now a client relationship manager at Morgan's company, approached her. "Boss, can I say something?" "Of course, Ashley. That day at the dealership when I defended you, it wasn't because I knew who you were. It was because it was the right thing to do. I know that. And I want you to know that working with you has transformed me. Not just professionally, but as a person. You taught me that doing right is worth more than any salary. You always had that within you, Ashley. I just gave you the opportunity to show it." 3 years after the incident, Morgan's company had become one of the largest diversity and inclusion consultancies in the country. They didn't just work with technology, but helped companies across all sectors create more inclusive environments. The dealership case had become legendary in the business world. Business administration students learned about it as an example of values-based leadership. Other executives cited Morgan as inspiration for their own ethical decisions. But the most significant impact was on the people whose lives were touched by the story. Hundreds of black employees were hired by companies that adopted policies inspired by Morgan's case. Dozens of other executives made similar decisions, refusing to do business with discriminatory organizations. In an interview for an international magazine, Morgan was asked if she regretted losing such a lucrative contract. "I never lost any contract," she replied. "I chose not to do business with people who didn't respect my dignity, and that choice brought me much better opportunities." How so? The original contract was for $65 million over 2 years. In the 3 years that followed, we earned over $200 million from contracts that arose directly because of my ethical decision. Furthermore, I built strong partnerships based on shared values, not just financial interests. What advice would you give to other executives facing similar dilemmas? To remember that reputation is built over years and destroyed in seconds, that lost money can be recovered, but lost dignity rarely returns, and that doing the right thing is rarely as costly as it seems at first glance. And for people suffering discrimination, do not accept it. Use every available resource to fight injustice, and remember that sometimes our pain can transform into strength for changes that benefit many others. 5 years after the incident, Morgan decided to write a book telling her story. Dignity is Non-Negotiable became a bestseller, with all profits directed to scholarships for young black students in business administration courses. The book inspired the creation of a business movement called Uncompromising Ethics, where executives publicly committed to not doing business with companies that practiced any kind of discrimination. Brad, the former salesman, had managed to find new employment and graduated with a degree in information technology. At one of the book launch talks, he approached Morgan again. "Mrs. Sterling, I got a job at a software company. I wanted to thank you." "Why?" "Because you forced me to look at myself and change. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary." "How are you?" "Good. Very good. And I learned that treating people with respect isn't a favor, it's an obligation." "I'm happy to hear that, Brad. And I wanted to ask, does your company still accept freelancers for IT projects?" Morgan smiled. "Send your resume to our human resources team. It will be evaluated like any other applicants." "Thank you so much for the opportunity." "It's not an opportunity, Brad. It's a fair selection process, which is how it always should have been." 10 years after the incident at the dealership, Morgan was invited to give a speech at the graduation ceremony of the business school where she had studied. At 52, she was considered one of the most influential executives in the country. In her address to the graduates, she told once more the story that had changed her life. You will face many moments in your career where you will have to choose between what is easy and what is right. Sometimes it will seem like doing the right thing will cost you dearly. But I can guarantee one thing: doing the wrong thing always costs more in the long run. Build your careers on solid values. Treat all people with dignity, regardless of their color, gender, sexual orientation, or social class. And always remember, you are not just executives, you are agents of social change. The business world has the power to transform society. Use that power responsibly. After the ceremony, the university's dean approached Morgan. "I'd like to make a proposal, Morgan." "What is it?" "How about we create a chair for ethical leadership and social responsibility in your name? It would be the first in the country focused specifically on the intersection between business and social justice. It would be an honor." The Sterling Chair for Ethical Leadership was inaugurated 2 years later, funded by the book's profits and donations from business leaders who admired her journey. 15 years after the incident, Morgan decided to retire from the company's executive presidency, keeping only an advisory board role. At her farewell party, over 1,000 people were present. Current and former employees, clients, partners, and even competitors who respected her. Ashley, now the company's chief operations officer, gave an emotional speech. 15 years ago, a young salesperson tried to defend a client who was being discriminated against. She ended up losing her job, but she gained a mentor, an opportunity, and a new life. That young person was me, and I can say that everything I am today I owe to the example of courage and integrity that Morgan showed me. More than a boss, she was a life teacher. She taught me that success without values isn't real success, that wealth without dignity isn't real wealth, and that power without social responsibility is worthless. Julian, now the company's president, also spoke. "I confess I didn't always understand Morgan's decisions. I thought she was too idealistic, too emotional. Today, I understand she was always right. Our company isn't just bigger financially, it's bigger morally. And that makes all the difference." Victoria Harrison, who had become one of the company's main partners, was also present. "Morgan's decision to cancel our contract was the best thing that could have happened to our company. It forced us to look in the mirror and not like what we saw. Today, we are a completely different organization, and we owe that to her courage to say no to what was wrong." At the end of the party, Morgan gave her final speech as CEO. "When I walked into that dealership 15 years ago, I was a successful businesswoman who wanted to buy a car. I left there as an activist who needed to buy a fight, and that fight gave me far more than any car ever could. I learned that we cannot separate who we are at work from who we are in life. Our values have to be consistent in every environment, and I learned that doing the right thing is not a sacrifice, it's an investment in ourselves, in the people around us, and in the society we want to build. I leave this company in the hands of people who have understood this lesson, and I hope they continue using business as a force for good, always." 20 years after the incident, Morgan was decorated by the National Administration with the National Leadership Medal in the Social Responsibility category. At the ceremony at the Presidential Palace, she was accompanied by Ashley, Julian, Victoria, and even by Brad, who had become a successful IT consultant and anti-discrimination activist. In her last public interview at 62, Morgan reflected on the impact of her decision. "Sometimes people ask me if I would change anything in that story, if I would do it differently, and my answer is always the same. I only wish I'd had the courage to do it sooner. For many years of my life, I swallowed small humiliations, small prejudices, small injustices, because I thought it was the price I had to pay to be successful. Today, I know I was wrong. Real success only comes when we don't have to give up our dignity to achieve it, and when we use our position to ensure other people don't have to either. If my story inspired other people not to accept discrimination, if it helped other companies rethink their practices, if it contributed to a slightly more just world, then it was worth far more than any $65 million contract." End of story. Now tell me what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you believe Morgan made the right decision? It will be amazing to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.